صباح الخير أو مساء الخير. Good morning or good evening or good afternoon, whatever the time you will be watching this lecture. In the previous lecture, I gave a presentation, analysis, as well as evaluation, critique of the classical model or the classical theory of corporate social responsibility. I also presented the major flaws in this perspective, and at the end I presented a theory that focuses on what is called the moral or the ethical minimum, the moral minimum of business ethics. Now I'm going to present the most modern theory of corporate social responsibility, that is the stakeholders theory. The stakeholders theory. Let me just give a general overview of that theory. The theory was suggested by Evan and Freeman, and its original idea, original theme is that every business decision affects a wide variety of people. It affects the consumers, it affects the shareholders, it affects the community, it affects the suppliers, it affects a variety of groups. Now, such decisions have benefits and have costs. The question would be, for each business decision, who should benefit among these groups and who should pay the costs? Who should benefit? Meaning what? Meaning that you don't look at one group only, that is the shareholders. You look at variety of groups, and you have to ask the question for each group, for each segment that deal with the company, that have transactions with the company. What are the benefits and what are the costs? The classical theory in this regard says very simple, or provide very simple solution for this. Once the legal rules or regulations are met, the stockholders should get the benefits. The shareholders should get the benefits. The new classical theory, that is the moral minimum that I described and analyzed in the previous lecture, says that once the minimum ethical or moral obligations or constraints are met, shareholders or stockholders should benefit. They have primacy or priority over other segments. The stakeholders theory rejects both of these claims of the classical theory and the moral minimum or the new classical perspective. Rejects both of them because they give privileged positions to the shareholders. I'm sorry, there is a mistake here in the last word. Instead of stakeholders, it is the shareholders. They reject the idea that the shareholders should be or should have priority. They should have privileged positions over the other groups. Okay. Evan and Freeman, the proponents, those who suggested the stakeholders theory of corporate social responsibility, have very strong critiques other than what I presented in the last lecture. They say that the classical model fails on its descriptive side and its normative side in what it describes as praxis, as reality, and what it calls for as something that should. Normative means something ideal or something that should be done. The descriptive perspective, the theory ignored the court cases and the legislations that impose managerial obligations on managers, responsibilities on managers, to consumers, to employees, to competitors, to environment, to the disabled. Variety of groups are defined within the law to variety of segments of groups who deal with the corporation. Such rules and laws were imposed by and the reference here is, of course, to democratic societies such as the US, such as the UK, such as Germany, such as France, that within these democratic societies, there are limitations that are put or imposed on management to take care of other groups and to benefit and not to cause harm to other groups, groups other than the shareholders or the stockholders. Another idea is that when managers pursue profit, try to maximize profit, as the classical theory and the moral minimum propose, when they try to do that, there is no guarantee that they will serve the interests of the various so-called stakeholders or the public or the various segments of the society. On normative account, and again, I mean by normative, something ideal, something should be done, something that constitutes a criterion or a standard. From normative perspective, management, according to the classical theory, should consider the consequences of the decisions it makes for the well-being of all affected groups. And remember, this is consistent with the utilitarian view, the utilitarian theory of business ethics. The utilitarian theory says achieving good, achieving benefits for the largest number of people. Now, if the largest number of people, meaning also the various segments who are affected or who deal with the company, customers, employees, community, suppliers, distributors, lenders, whoever, various groups who deal with the company. All stakeholders, according to the classical view, all stakeholders should be treated, but making sure that there is primacy and there is priority that need to be given to the shareholders, the stockholders. Now, this is not right, because all stakeholders have equal rights and all groups should be treated as equal and as ends, not as means. We don't deal with the suppliers as means to make profit. We don't hire employees as means to maximize return and profit. We don't deal with distributors as means to get our product to be sold and marketed in the market. So they should be treated as ends, not as means. And this is, of course, consistent with the principle suggested by the German philosopher Kant. So, in conclusion, the stakeholders theory does not give primacy to one stakeholder group over another. And management, according to the stakeholders' view or theory, has the responsibility to keep relations among stakeholders in balance, not to give more attention, primacy, favor to one group over or against the interest of the others. The major concept of stakeholders, or any group of stakeholders concept, as explained by Evan and Freeman, there are two perspectives or view of the stakeholders. Another view says that stakeholders include any group or any segment that deal with the company, the firm, the organization, and that are vital to the survival and the success of that firm or organization. Any group that deal, that transact, but that constitute an essential element for the continuation, the success, and the survival of that firm. A wider view of stakeholders says that stakeholders include any group or individuals who can affect or be affected by the corporation, not necessarily to contribute to their success or survival, but if they are affected, or if they affect the firm or the organization. So, what does the theory state? What does it suggest? What are the premises or the propositions that it offers? There is the ethical claims of stockholders, shareholders, making profit, getting return on their investment. This profit making or profit maximizing need to be balanced against any comparable ethical claims of anyone else affected by business decisions and business transactions. Meaning that you should not give profit maximization a priority, but rather to balance the interests of the various segments or groups that deal with the organization. Many ethical claims of other groups do in fact exist, not only those of the shareholders or the stakeholders. The interests of any party or segment affected by management decisions in this regard deserve equal attention and consideration in management decisions and management practices. This implies that management has a broad range of ethical responsibilities to the various groups that deal with the organization. These groups are employees, suppliers, customers, local communities, distributors, lenders, whoever, depending on the nature of the organization and what it does and the nature of the activities that it engages in and the kind of transactions with the various elements in its environment. It has, management in this regard has the responsibility to provide equal treatment and to balance the interests of these various groups with the interest of the stockholders. Again, not to provide an advantage for the shareholders or the stockholders over any other groups that I just mentioned. Okay. The stakeholders theory is not without criticism or critiques. There are certain critiques that have been directed to that theory. The first critique comes out of the classical theory. People attacking, evaluating, critiquing the propositions provided by the stakeholder theory. They say responsibilities to stockholders should override the ethical responsibilities to other affected parties. Why? They offer reasoning, they offer, answers to this. From the economic standpoint, that they say that the net social consequences of profit maximization will always outweigh any other objective. Meaning what? Profit maximization benefits the society as a whole. And pursuing the maximization of profit by business will have social benefits, will have positive outcomes for the society as a whole. This is why we should give priority. We should make the interest of the stockholders, the shareholders, override the other elements, whether they are or other goals or other considerations, whether they are social, human, cultural, whatever. The primacy of private property, the importance, the respect for the private property of individuals to buy and sell, to engage in business, to establish companies, to invest in a capitalistic society, private property is just like almost like a religion. It's not just something that the society believes in. It's a key rule, a key tenet for the whole economic system of the society. So the primacy of private property should be applied over any other rights. This is very serious. Any other rights means what? Any human rights, any social rights, any political rights, any cultural rights, So private property supersedes, it is ahead, it overrides, all the various rights that are assumed by the stakeholders theory. The second critique says that there is little applied or practical implications of the theory of stakeholders. How? They say that the theory is very general and ambiguous, vague. It doesn't offer clear, practical guidelines to management on how to act. It offers little guidance, little clarity that would help managers to practice what the theory suggests, trying to fulfill the needs, trying to balance the interests of the various groups that deal with the organization. This critique includes two types of problems. The critique of lacking practical or applied implications. One, the wider definition of stakeholders places managers under very difficult demand, very difficult burden of determining who might be affected by every decision. They say the stakeholders theory, by asking management to consider all the groups, all the segments, all the stakeholders, customers, employees, suppliers, banks, community, whatever, that how could management be able to consider all these groups for every decision that is made? They say this is not practical. It cannot be applied. It is impossible for management to be required to do that. This is the wider definition of stakeholders, okay? From the narrow definition of stakeholders, those who are impacted by the organization, those who deal directly with the organization, that definition offers maybe more practical options than the wider definition. However, but trying to satisfy certain segments, certain stakeholders, trying to satisfy, for example, the employees, may be in conflict with trying to satisfy the customers. They may say that satisfying the employees, you pay them higher wages, you offer them benefits, you offer them services. All of this costs money, and the higher cost would result in higher prices that may be in conflict with what the consumers need. Not just that, but also it may conflict with what the shareholders, the stockholders need in terms of return on investment in this regard. So, trying to satisfy one party may be in conflict with the interests of other parties. And if you highly focus on one group, it's not possible that you can balance at the same time the interests of the various groups. Okay, there are also the problems of deciding what course of action follows to balance the interests of the various groups or segments who deal with the organization. The theory doesn't provide any practical guidelines, any course of action to balance these diverse interests. And it doesn't provide, how to resolve the conflicts and the conflicting interests between the various segments or the various groups of stakeholders. In conclusion, the above critiques are asking perhaps too much from the stakeholders' theory. The theory represents the stakeholders' theory. In conclusion, represents a major advancement over other ethical theories of business. Let me just conclude by a little piece of information that I just got today regarding the coronavirus. The USA, and particularly the White House, tried to get exclusive right over the vaccine a German company is working on developing. So the US government wanted to buy the right to use that vaccine. So it offered large sums of money to that company so that the vaccine that it would produce would be exclusive right to the American government. Two things happened out of this. First, the health minister of Germany rejected this attempt and said that Germany and the company that is trying to work on developing the vaccine is not producing it to benefit German people, but rather to benefit the rest of the world. The company itself also resented the offer, despite the fact that it is a hefty, a large sum of money. Now, the lesson about this is that, or the question, let me just not say the lesson, but the question here that can be raised in a situation like this. Perhaps the White House is acting from very narrow, selfish perspective, trying to monopolize, to buy the exclusive right to that vaccine so that it can control the availability of the vaccine to the rest of the world. Now, is this ethical? Of course it is not. Of course it is not. from purely business and from purely utilizing this global crisis situation regarding the coronavirus to maximize the power of the US over the rest of the world, is against human principles. Against that in such crisis, all the world should collaborate, should help each other, rather than to try to utilize and exploit that particular situation to the benefit of one country or to the benefit of one people. Second, such act is even contrary to the classical view, particularly the utilitarian perspective. Remember that the utilitarian perspective says you try to benefit the largest number of people. So even from that perspective, this is wrong, because by having exclusive right over the vaccine, you don't avail the vaccine to the rest of the world. I thought I would end with this incident, and I wish you good luck in studying the material presented in this lecture. Thank you.